Welcome to Masters of Main Street, conversations with business experts. This is your one-stop destination for insights, inspiration, and invaluable lessons from the most seasoned and successful business experts. I'm your host, Steve, along with business partner Rebecca of RP Borway Partners, and together we bring a wealth of experience across the corporate board sector and the small business advisory. So whether you're just starting your journey or you're an established business owner looking for ways to innovate and grow, you've come to the right place. Now, each month we'll bring together industry experts for in-depth, enlightening panel discussions. They're here to share their wisdom and experiences and the hot trigger issues facing all of us in the small to medium business environment. Now, this isn't just theory, it is a roadmap for success for those who've navigated the journey themselves. Grab a notebook, settle in, and get ready to transform your business vision into reality. On today's episode, we'll be discussing all things sales for small businesses with our distinguished panelist, Dan of Pineapple Consulting. So welcome to Masters of Main Street. Let's get started. Dan, can you provide a brief introduction to yourself, your background, and a little bit about Pineapple Consulting?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've worked in the sales industry since 2008, predominantly starting out in the health and fitness space, running my own PT business, and then branching into coaching other personal trainers and gyms across all avenues of business, but with a particular focus on sales. I then moved into sales coaching with a company called Swish Sales Coaching up in Gold Coast, working with everything from small, medium enterprise up to large organizations. And then from there, I've just explored business coaching and sales coaching through the rest of my career, really honing those skills.
One thing I did really like was your actual business name, Pineapple Consulting. Can you tell me how you actually came up with this name, and does it have any actual significance?
Yeah, so when I was originally looking for a business name, I was Googling for interesting facts, and I came across a really interesting one about pineapples. Before I kind of link that, I'll tell you a little bit about the fact that I find that the success of a company is an analogy of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. So basically, a pineapple is neither a pine nor an apple, but a fruit that consists of many berries that have grown and fused together. So from my perspective, it's the living embodiment of cohesion. At Pineapple Consulting, we strive to facilitate the growth of businesses through rigorously understanding your team's many berries and cohesively fusing with it. Found it really interesting that most people assume it's one solid fruit, where it's actually multiple components coming together, just like a business. So we're firm believers in echoing the TEAM acronym, which is together, everyone achieves more. And through this cohesive approach, we've developed infrastructures and sustainable business practices to help businesses weather the storms of market fluctuations, challenges in growth, and whatever it might be.
All right, as we are actually talking all things sales, what would you say is the most important or critical component in generating sales?
Yeah, so regardless of what tools are out there, activity is the most important factor in sales. Scripting, common objection handling, cleverly framed value propositions, these all contribute to closing deals, but at its core, a successful sales campaign is law of averages, which is just a fancy way of saying how much activity goes in to how much result comes out. So for example, real quick numbers, if you were to do 50 calls, 20 connect, 10 book, 3 convert. So that's your general law of averages. There's a really solid framework for driving activity with yourself, your team, and it gives you something tangible to measure. So knowing your numbers and driving high activity can never be replaced with a silver bullet or any special skill set. And it's essential to build a sales rhythm, which is sometimes referred to a cadence for those who are a bit fancier, which is the pattern and framework that every lead is going to go through.
I know in some of our discussions previously you have talked about rhythm or cadence. Can you explain this a little further so that we can understand this better?
Yeah, so when it comes to the rhythm or the cadence, it's kind of like the beat or pulse of your business. So rhythm of a sale is simple in execution, but it's kind of challenging in the overall concept. So it refers to the pace or the steps and volume of your overarching sales approach. So in order to define your business's unique rhythm, you can ask yourself a few questions. How many leads can I or my team realistically handle? This is probably one of the most important questions. Too many and they start to slip through the cracks. You sacrifice quality because of that volume, and you can't get to all of your follow-ups and touch points. Too few, and you're losing valuable exposure, and your conversion rate needs to be unrealistically high for those efforts to have a return on that investment. Basically, how much revenue is in each deal is another good question. Is that a client or service worth, and how long does it usually take for the decision to be made? So if your time frames are 2 to 3 weeks, you need to account for that. If they're several months, you need to account for that. So what can be done to speed up this time frame without adding pressure? Really important not to stress out your clients, but what kind of tools can you start to implement, and how many touch points is required to reassure the client, build value, and customize the pitch to that particular client. So essentially what you don't want to be doing is that machine gun approach sales where you're just reading off a script. You want to tailor that to each individual customer, and you've got to account for that in your cadence. And then how many resources do you have to allocate? Is it just you? Do you have a team? Are you outsourcing? So really important to look at those resources. And then how strong is your marketing strategy to deliver the volume of leads? So it's all well and good to be like, we need hundreds of leads. Where are they going to come from? So this is where looking at these questions can build that framework. And then these answers will help to build the sales cadence and structure, which is invaluable to reducing waste of leads, time and energy, and see a strong return on investment on your sales hires and your marketing efforts.
So I suppose in respect, there's a certain level of sweet spot between too many and too little leads and being able to manage them properly. So going back to some of the discussion, we were talking and we sort of left off at activity. So what sort of steps or procedures do you recommend, or would you recommend for small businesses?
Yeah, this is the pattern and framework that a lead would go through. So for example, step 1, you'd be looking at the lead details to be verified. You want to do a little bit of research before going into that conversation. Look at the company client investigation, and then go in armed and ready. So you want to show the customer that you're not just using the same approach for everyone. You've done a little bit of digging, and your solution potentially is going to line up to that specific company. And it shows that specificity, and you're not just doing machine gun sales. Nobody likes being sold to. People want to have a genuine discussion around their particular needs. I'd go to step 2, which is potentially the cold call of the outreach. So this is the initial value proposition with the sole goal of booking in the discovery call. Trying to close on the first deal, depending on your industry, can add a lot of pressure. So it's about setting that agenda nice and early and giving them the opportunity to warm up to the process. I try to keep it 3 to 5 minutes maximum, establish the process that you're going to go through and set the agenda. So basically, Mr. Customer, I'm going to be taking you through these steps. By the end of it, we're going to have a decision of yes, we're compatible and we'll help you out, or no, we really appreciate your time. These are potentially places we can refer you on to. Step 3, discovery call to reinforce the agenda. So before you launch into your discovery call, remind them of the steps you're going to go through, get their buy-in. This is the initial value proposition. You're going to talk them through the demonstration of the product and industry knowledge, get them to talk. So ideally, and if you're looking at things like Gong.io, who have analyzed thousands of sales calls, if you can get the customer talking 75% of the time, you're going to have a much higher chance of converting. So this is where you use open-ended questions, not yes or no responses, and then dig deeper into those answers to find the true pain point. Don't just take that first superficial answer. You want to delve a little bit deeper into that and pull on that thread. But once you find that pain point, find out why it's a pain point. Find out what kind of outcomes those pain points are going to solve. Find out why it's been a pain point for so long. Build a really good understanding of that pain point before moving on. And then step 4 would be the value add. So this is essentially an email or a text message to let them know, hey, I'm thinking of you. I've discovered a bit more information that could be of use, and it's just going to keep them warm before you go through your demo and your close. So basically for that final point, you demonstrate that you've listened and heard their needs and their discovery. You're going to match up your solution to those needs. So go through a bit of a recap on what they've said. Mr. Customer, you mentioned XYZ. Is that still the case? Did I get that right? Fantastic. I understood. Beautiful. And then I would align. So I'd use shadow selling, which is a technique where you talk about how you've helped similar customers. So it's all well and good to be like, yep, I can help you with that. It's a completely different scenario to go, we've worked with XYZ company with very similar problems. They were facing this and we were able to offer this solution. And then finally, the close is so important to, we call it reconciling, but essentially what that means is bringing them back to earth. We don't want to leave people on that emotional high of the close. Talk them through what the next steps are, reiterate the cost, reiterate the benefits, and then just bring them back into a more tangible analytical mindset, which is going to reduce your level of people calling up and canceling. So you're just going to calm them down and leave them in a very logical, yep, this is the right call.
So I suppose, yeah, sorry.
I was just going to add one final thing. That approach is just a very overarching step by step, but you tailor that to every business and make it specific to you.
I was going to say, for me, I think step 3, when we go back, is it can be thought of a bit like an iceberg, where we've got to get to below the surface and find out what that root cause of the pain is, so that we can tap into the solutions of what we're providing for the client.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I suppose this goes back to the point about rhythm and cadence that we were talking about earlier. Would you say that?
Yeah, so with that overarching rhythm, the core aspect of it is you don't want to just be doing activity for activity's sake. It's the most common mistake I see with businesses in regards to sales. They repeat the same actions and get frustrated with the same results, which we all are familiar, that's the definition of insanity. So just like we know A/B testing is important and commonly practiced in marketing, it should be just as valuable in sales. So essentially you choose a starting point with your structured activity and assess over a long period of time if that's going to have a benefit. So you're going to start with that framework and it's either working or it's not, and then you start to tailor it. But having that framework gives you something to assess. And then you would choose a starting point. From that starting point, you would then tailor that to what your sales cycle is. So if you're a 2-week sales cycle, if you're a 6 to 8 week sales cycle, you want to make sure that you're giving that enough time to see some results or not seeing results. So if you're a 9-month sales cycle for one deal, you wouldn't assess over 2 or 3 weeks to see if it's working, because you need that amount of time to see, yes, it's had a benefit, or no, we need to tweak it.
Okay, in relation to the steps that you've actually detailed with us, does this lead into a framework for sales? And if so, what would that actually look like?
So essentially what you want to do is start with a script, but instead of a script, you want to start with a framework. So what tends to happen with a script is it sounds very robotic and disingenuous. So you want to look at a framework where you're raising objections early. Don't be afraid of objections, which is a very common mistake I see. You get to the crux of asking for a deal, then all of these objections come up and you're having to rehash values. You're having to dig deeper back into that objection. Get it out of the way nice and early, then go through the value proposition, and then go through the close. So you want to handle them before they arise. What happens is if you get an objection, it now sounds like excuses. If you bring them up first with the handle, it sounds like this is a subject matter expert and he's hearing me out. He knows what I'm going to be talking about. Bring all hesitations to the forefront, deal with those before moving on, and then bring that into the sales management process. So you want to keep the team accountable to their numbers. You want the ability to diagnose where things are working, where things aren't working, and all that comes down to having an effective sales process.
Do you see that, say, team culture, would that be a vital component of a good sales framework? And would you say that aligning culture with your business vision or purpose is also critical in the sales process?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when it comes to the culture of a company. When you're looking at a sales role, the only thing the sales role delivers is revenue. So a salesperson can do a month of really hard work And if they don't get the sale, that hard work means nothing to the organization oftentimes. So rewarding people for putting in the activity and having that really strong company culture will balance out that element of sales, which is just unavoidable. And the practical application of company culture and best practices in leadership management, it challenges the flaws that are inherent with company culture. So oftentimes it's a tick box activity, and we all know that the people element is one of the biggest costs for most businesses in most industries. So having a process around staff onboarding, upskilling, and retention are huge financial resource components. So doing it right is going to have a strong, tangible return on that investment. So it's a complex and nuanced element of running a business. So building a company culture has to become more than that tick box activity. And I think the cause of that mindset is that a lot of business owners and managers find themselves in these positions because they're really good at that particular job. So for example, a really good carpenter starts carpentry business, but all of a sudden they're no longer a carpenter, they're a business owner, or they're no longer a carpenter, they're a manager. So developing those skills and changing your focus from one role to the next is going to be really important in the success of your business.
So how can we understand the importance of a sales homework and culture? How can we use this to manage the various stakeholders in our business?
Yeah, so how to leverage the different stakeholders, experience and expertise. You can leverage both flat and hierarchical company structures. So it's important to manage both up and down. I think oftentimes we just rely on our managers to call the shots, but being proactive and seeing sometimes what a manager might be lacking and getting involved in that process in a, I guess, assertive and non-confrontational way is going to give everybody the best chance of success. So as you progress through a hierarchical position, your focus changes on who you're looking after. So when you're at the bottom, you're looking after the customers. When you move up into management, you're looking after the staff. And when you move into leadership, you're looking after the company as a whole. So really important to shift your focus as you progress through those levels. And at the end of the day, every decision has advantages and sacrifices. And it's important to start to assess how to amplify the advantages of a decision and mitigate those sacrifices. And without all of these structures and these processes, it's very difficult to do that. You're flying by the seat of your pants and you're being intuitive, which can hold a certain point. But in order to leverage those advantages and choose which sacrifices you want to do, you need to have that step-by-step approach. So it also helps with handling your own imposter syndrome in terms of working with your team through their personal challenges and looking at your own personal challenges and separating the two.
Yeah, I think we all have had that experience of imposter syndrome at some stage of our careers. Whilst this might actually be taking us right back to the beginning of today's little session, I've always been a little bit confused about the difference between pipelines and funnels. Now, is there actually a difference, or are they just the same thing? And also, is there any difference between sales pipelines and funnels in terms of lead generation and sales?
Yeah, absolutely. So where it can also get a bit tricky, there's a difference between a marketing funnel and a sales funnel, and there's also a difference between a sales funnel and a sales pipeline. The differences are pretty subtle, and not every business is going to need both, but it is important to have that distinction. So basically, a sales pipeline is your system of lead generation, qualification, and nurturing. And where that differs from a sales funnel is that the funnel is a visual representation of potential customers moving through various stages. So essentially, the top of the funnel is where the customer is entering. Mid funnel is the sales steps, or what we've just called your pipeline, and the value building falls in at the bottom of the funnel. And that's where you're starting to close and reconcile the customer. So look, there is a lot of overlap, and oftentimes defining the 2 or 3 differences isn't as important as having those in place and then deciding for your business which avenue you're going to leverage more. Are you going to have a pipeline where it's more B2B, or are you going to have more of a funnel when it's more B2C?
Okay. All right. Thanks very much for the incredible knowledge and information that you've shared with us today. Now, is there one last piece of advice that you would provide to small businesses looking to rapidly grow their business?
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to sales and the business as a whole, it's so important to quantify both the current state, which means look at where your business is now and allocate real numbers to that, so define it quite clearly, and then the future goals and states of the business. So whether it's the revenue of the company, whether it's the growth in size, what you want to do from there is when you've articulated both of those and quantified it, you want to reverse engineer the steps to achieve that goal and create a plan and a timeline to hit it, which are the two most important parts of the SMART acronym. So you want to make sure that you've quantified that, you've reverse engineered, and you have achievable targets and timelines to hit it. It's just like driving to a destination without a map, which is doable, but it's a whole lot harder. So create your business map and execute the steps to reach the goals that you've set for yourself and your company.
Yeah, I like to explain that to clients as now, where, and how.
Yeah, absolutely.
Short and sharp, but
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Dan and Rebecca, for today's session. We will provide Dan's contact details and links in the video and uploads, and we'll see you next time.
Beautiful. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Dan.